Gone are the days where we can just ignore what the government's doing and think that our freedoms are going to be protected. Okay, those days are now gone. Most of Canadians haven't woken up to that, but they're gone. Because the governments now will try to pass laws that restrict our freedoms. I mean, Bill C-6 is a perfect example of that. You guys probably aren't even familiar about Bill C-6 because our wonderful civil liberty groups haven't raised a peep. Bill C-6 is a bill currently before Parliament called the Consumer Protection Act. Now, those of you who remember Bill C-51, there was also Bill C-52 introduced the same day. Bill C-52 is back as Bill C-6. Okay? So this is Bill C-52 back. Now, the Consumer Protection Act does not apply to natural health products and drugs. So many in the industry are going, oh, okay, I can relax. I don't need to worry about it. It doesn't apply to natural health products. But there's kind of two risks here that we need to take into consideration. Why Bill C-6 doesn't apply to natural health products is the Consumer Protection Act says, well, this applies to every consumer product, which would include natural health products, except for consumer products listed in Schedule 1. And in Schedule 1, it says things covered by the Food and Drug Act. Oh, okay, so the Act says it doesn't apply. Great. Well, the problem is then when you look at the section of the Act that says, well, what regulations the minister can make, it says the minister can add or subtract from Schedule 1 by regulation. Now, regulations, they don't have to go through Parliament. There doesn't have to be a vote. If you want to pass a regulation and you're the government, you just publish it in the Canada Gazette twice. Okay, so even a minority government can pass a regulation. So by regulation, they could change Bill C-6 to apply to natural health products. Now, remember Bill C-51. Everyone got all excited because of these tremendous enforcement powers that were going to be given to Health Canada, and we were all worried if Health Canada got these powers, they could just kill the natural health product industry. Well, all those same powers are in Bill C-6. So the danger is we could all sit still and allow Bill C-6 to pass. I mean, it doesn't apply to us. And then they could just by regulation make it apply. Now, I'm not saying that's likely to happen. That's just a danger. But what I think is a real danger is Bill C-6, the Consumer Protection Act, gives these powers to Health Canada inspectors. Okay, the same inspectors that regulate natural health products. Now, consumer products have a very low risk profile. And Bill C-6 gives them this big toolbox of powers. Now, I'll go into how these powers are illegal, but this big toolbox of powers to deal with this little risk. And then the same inspectors, when we go to the drug category, which actually has a very high risk profile, you know, when we're talking about chemical pharmaceuticals, and they got this little toolbox. I mean, it's a legal toolbox, but by comparison, it's small. Now, if we let Bill C-6 pass, and Health Canada just sits still for a while, they don't do anything unreasonable with this big toolbox, how long is it until they say, you know what, this really isn't reasonable? We're the same inspectors, and we've got all these broad powers to regulate a really low-risk group. But then in the higher-risk group, we've got much smaller powers. This doesn't make sense. We should have one set of powers. And a bureaucracy isn't going to say it's the smaller set. They're going to say we need these broader powers to deal with the higher-risk category. And my concern is that reasoning is actually really persuasive. I mean, how is the average citizen going to get excited about that? I mean, they already have the powers for a lower risk category. So, you know, what my concern is that if Bill C-6 passes, then those powers are going to become the norm. Now, what's wrong with these powers? Let's talk about this big toolbox. The first thing is Bill C-6 abolishes the law of trespass. Now, that doesn't really excite a lot of people because we actually don't think about our right to enjoy our private land and our homes. We actually don't think about that because we actually have privacy. And we don't think of the law of trespass. I mean, we've had it for our whole history as a nation and actually before because it was part of the British common law. But our legal system actually so protects your right to private enjoyment of your property that if somebody trespasses on your land, whether they're a police officer or just another citizen, and you don't want them there, and you sue them, it's actually the only civil tort where you don't have to prove to the court you were damaged. The court just gets enraged for you and orders them to pay you compensation. It's in our criminal code. I mean, you can call the police and say somebody's trespassing. They will be charged criminally and go through the criminal courts and be convicted. We so guard this. Now, Bill C-6 says it abolishes the law of trespass. So Health Canada inspectors, you can literally be now sitting at your dinner table eating, and a Health Canada inspector can be peering in your window, standing in your flower bed, watching you, and there's nothing you can do. You can't charge them civilly, you can't charge them criminally. I think, it might be good for beer sales, because now when we have a barbecue, you're out on your deck in the summer, you need to have a couple extra beers in the cooler so the Health Canada inspectors in your backyard, have a beer. Because you have to be compassionate, right? It's hot. So, do you want Health Canada or the police or any state agent to be able to be in your backyard and there's nothing you can do about it? You see, when I put it that way, people go, no, actually, I don't want that. Now, are we in such danger by consumer products that we need to abolish the law of trespass? It's bizarre, isn't it? Now, I'm not telling you that Health Canada can enter your private home without a search warrant, okay? Because Bill C-6 says, no, you need a search warrant to enter a private home. And some people are going to go, oh, good. So, if I'm having a bubble bath, I don't have to worry about a Health Canada inspector walking in. Well, that's happened with, search warrants. So, I could tell you some horror stories about what's happened with search warrants. So, where clients of mine have needed years of counseling to get over what happened. And those are with legal entries. But we don't want the police barging in when we're having a bubble bath unless they have a warrant. And under the current law, we've struck a balance. So whether you're the RCMP or a municipal police force or your Health Canada or you're some other federal agency, they all use the same search warrant provision found in the criminal code. And a court will only give the police or Health Canada the authority to enter your home if there's a substantial likelihood that they're going to find evidence of a crime. Okay? And we've struck that balance because as a society, we want the state to be able to solve crime. That actually protects us. But unless they're convinced a court the substantial likelihood to find evidence of a crime, we don't want the state in our bathroom when we're having a bubble bath. Now, Bill C-6 is for the very first time moving away from that standard. Bill C-6 says that a justice can issue a warrant if Health Canada is likely to find something regulated by the Act. Now, the Act regulates every consumer product. Does anyone have a home without a consumer product in it? Even an empty home, the light fixtures and switches are consumer products. So when I read it, I'm thinking, I can't think of a home, I can't think of a situation where a justice may not feel compelled to issue a warrant. Well, are consumer products so risky that we have to move away from our current search warrant provisions? It's a good question. Bill C-6 absolutely moves away from the rule of law. Now, and I have to explain what the rule of law is to you to kind of drive home why this is important. And what the rule of law is we have the state here, we have you and your property here, and we have the courts between. So for the state to actually get to you, so to imprison you, or to get to your property, to take your property away, they have to go through the courts. And so, for example, back in medieval times, let's say you pissed off the king and he wanted to imprison you, he would just send the army to get you and drag you into the castle. There was no courts. If the king wanted your property, he would just send the troops in and they'd take your property. If he fancied your daughter, they would go and get your daughter. And, after a while, people kind of thought, this isn't really working for us. And there were things in various countries, things like rebellion. There were wars fought over this. And we have established the rule of law. So now, the king or the state, whatever the form is, if they want to imprison us, they have to go through the courts, and there has to be some reason, like we've committed a crime. If they want to seize our property, there has to be a reason, like we owe the state money, they've got a judgment against us, and they're going to enforce the judgment. Or it's evidence of a crime. Those are the two most obvious ones. But Bill C-6 says no, Health Canada inspectors can seize your property without going to court for a warrant.